I have washed a great many things in my life. Blood out of cotton, grease off the necks of men too tired to do it themselves, the salt off a child's face. By the time the war the broods called the long wind came down over the frontier, I had been washing things at Saltgate Halt for 19 years, and I had stopped expecting any of it to mean much. A nurse on the night shift learns that the meaning, if there is any, comes later, or never, and that her business is the next hour and the one after that. Saltgate sat on the cold shoulder of Bray, a moon nobody had wanted until the lanes shifted and suddenly everybody had to pass through it. It was a transit halt, not a hospital, not a fortress, a long low building of poured stone and steel ribs, with platforms on 3 sides where the haulers came down out of the white sky and let out whoever they were carrying. In the good years it had been farmers and freight. In the year I am telling you about, it was everyone. The long wind had set the great broods moving against one another up in the high dark, and when the powers of the sky go to war, it is always the small things underneath that have to run. So they ran through us, whole families with their lives in 2 bags, old men who had buried their wives and could not say where they were going, only that they were going. And among them, because the broods themselves were scattered and frightened and fleeing, came the dragonkin, not the great ones. You understand, never the great ones, but the low folk of the broods, the herders and the wing menders and the small clans that had no say in the war and no shelter from it. They came down on the platforms with the humans, shaking the snow off their scaled backs, folding their wings tight, herding their young with low sounds in their throats that I felt in my teeth before I learned to hear them. I want you to understand what the dragonkin were, because people who have only heard the songs get it wrong. They were not the painted things from the old tailies. They were animals and they were persons both, the way a horse is an animal and a grieving woman is a person, and somehow they were both at once. The smallest of them stood as high as my hip. The herders stood taller than a man, scaled along the spine in slate and bronze, with folded wings like wet sailcloth and eyes set deep under a ridge of horn. They did not speak as we speak. They made sounds and they made the long looks, and after enough years on a platform you learn to read a tilt of the head the way you read a cough. They were proud in their way. They did not ask for much. That, I think, is why so few of us ever looked closely at them. The night it started for me, we had taken in 400 more than the halt was built to hold, and the heating in the east wing had failed, and a man in the queue was dying of nothing more dramatic than his own old heart, and I was on my feet at the far end of the platform with my sleeves wet to the elbow, doing the arithmetic that night nurses do, which is the arithmetic of who can wait. The haulers kept coming down. The snow came in sideways every time the doors opened. Somewhere above the cloud the broods were tearing the sky apart, and we could hear it, a sound like the world's largest door closing, again and again. And each time it came the children in the queue went quiet and then started up crying all at once. I did not see him arrive. That is the truth of it, and it has shamed me a little all these years. I did not see the moment a child was left behind. There was a hauler unloading. A clan of the low kin pressed forward in a panic because the platform marshals were shouting that the next storm front was closing and the doors had to seal. And in that crush, the way it happens, the way a thing falls out of a cart and nobody hears it over the wheels, a small one went down between the legs of the crowd and did not come up with them. By the time the doors sealed and the hauler lifted away into the white, the clan was gone, and on the cold stone at the edge of the platform, there was a shape that everyone was stepping around because stepping around things was the only way any of us were getting through that night. I went and looked because looking was my job. He was very small, smaller than the herders young I had seen, which told me later, when I knew how to read it, that he was younger than they let their young travel, that he should not have been on a platform at all. He was the color of a banked fire, amber going to ash along the back, and he had pulled himself into the angle of the wall and made himself as small as a thing with horns and a tail can make itself. One wing was wrong. It hung from the shoulder at an angle a wing should not hang, and the membrane of it was torn through near the root, and where it was torn there was the dark blood of the kin, which is nearly black and smells of hot iron and rain. He was not crying the way our children cry. He was making a sound so low and so steady that I had been hearing it for a minute before I understood it was coming from him, and not from the failing pipes. A thin, even keening, the sound a creature makes when it has decided that no one is coming, and it is only waiting now to find out how the end will feel. I have heard men make that sound. You do not forget it. I knelt down. My knees were no good even then, and the stone was wet, and a marshal somewhere behind me was shouting that the east wing was sealed and I had a cue, and I knelt down anyway, and I put out my hand the way you put out your hand to a dog you do not know, low, palm up, slow, no eyes. He stopped keening. He did not move. I could see his sides going, quick and shallow, and I could see the one good eye on me, the slit of it gone wide and black in the dim, and I thought, he is deciding whether I am the thing that kills him. All right, I said. I do not know why I said it. It is what I say. All right, there you are, there you are. He let me touch the side of his neck. The scales there were small and fine and cold, far too cold, and under them I could feel the quick, terrible drumming of a heart far too fast, and I did the thing I have done 10,000 times, the only thing I know how to do, which is to stay still and let a frightened thing learn the shape of your hand. The great door of the sky closed again, above the cloud, and he flinched the whole length of his small body and pressed his head against my wrist, as if my wrist were a wall that could keep the sky out. I know, I told him. I know, it's loud. It's a long way off. It was not a long way off. I did not know how far off it was. I told him it was a long way off because that is what you tell a frightened child, and whatever else he was, in that moment he was a frightened child. A marshal came up behind me. I knew him, Edric, a decent enough man worn mean by the work. He stood over us with his hands on his belt, and he said what they all said that winter. You can't keep it here, Una. It's brood stock. Its people will come back for it or they won't, and either way it's not ours to feed. Its people are gone, I said. You sealed the doors. I sealed the doors because the front was coming. I know why you sealed them. I did not look up at him. I had my hand on the child's neck and I could feel him listening, the way an animal listens to the tone and not the words, and I did not want him to hear me afraid. He's hurt, Edric. The wings torn through. He'll be dead by the morning shift if he's out here. Then he'll be dead by the morning shift. He said it without cruelty, which was worse. We've got people, Una, human people. The man in Bay 9 isn't going to see morning either, and he's one of ours. Then go and sit with the man in Bay 9, I said, and let me do my work. He stood there a while. Then he said the thing that I have turned over in my mind more times than I can count, because he meant it as a warning, and it has come to seem to me like the truest thing anyone said that whole long night. You don't know what that is, he said. None of us do. You could be wasting your last good hours on a thing that won't even remember you. That's all right, I said. Most of them don't. And I picked the child up. He was heavier than he looked and lighter than he should have been, and he made the low keen again when the bad wing moved, and then he turned his head and put it under my chin in the soft place at the base of my throat, the way a human infant does, the way I had not had done to me in more years than I wanted to count, and something in my chest that I had thought was long since worn smooth caught on it like a thread on a nail. I carried him off the platform. I told him, all the way, the thing I tell them. I've got you, I've got you. I'm not going to leave you there, I'm not going anywhere. That was the promise. I made it the way I have made it to 100 frightened things. Half a lie and half a habit, not knowing. How could I have known that this time there was something in the dark above the cloud that would hold me to it? I made him a place in the linen store, which was the only warm room left, because the dryers vented into it, and the failing heat in the rest of the building had not yet been missed there. I cleared a shelf at floor level, the wide low one where we kept the rolled blankets, and I made him a kind of nest of the warmest of them, and I set the old heat lamp we used for the premature human bobbies down low where it would throw warmth without throwing light in his eyes. He watched all of it from the corner with the one good eye, the bad wing held out from his body, and he did not trust me, and I did not ask him to. Trust is a thing you earn from the kin slowly or not at all. I had the whole night. I thought I had the whole night. The wing was the first thing. I will not pretend I knew the anatomy of a dragon child's wing. I did not. No one at Saltgate did, but a torn thing is a torn thing, and a nurse learns the grammar of it even in a language she has never read. The membrane was holed near the root where the long bone meets the shoulder, and the bone itself was not broken, which was the one piece of mercy in it, only wrenched out of its seat. I have set men's shoulders. I have a sense of when a thing wants to go home. I warmed my hands first at the lamp, because cold hands frighten, and I went slow, and I talked the whole time, low and even the nonsense I talk. And when I felt the joint find its seat and slide back, I felt him go rigid the whole length of himself, and heard the keen climb up and break. And then settle, because the worst of the pain had passed through him and out the other side. And he understood, the way an animal understands and a person understands. That the hand that had hurt him toward something better. He let me bind the membrane after that. I had no thread that would hold in living tissue, so I did what the field does, I cleaned it with what I had, and I drew the torn edges as near together as they would come, and I bound a light dressing over it to keep it still and keep it clean, and I told him he would have to keep it folded and let it knit, and I have no idea how much of that he understood, and I suspect more than I would have guessed. When it was done, he lay in the nest of blankets with the wing held against his side, and he looked at me. And I sat down on the floor with my back against the shelving because my knees were finished, and I looked back at him. There, I said, that's the worst of it, that's the worst of it now. He made a sound, not the keen, a different sound lower with a kind of break in the middle of it, and I did not know then what it was, and I know now that it was the sound the kin make when they are very young and very frightened, and they are asking the only question that the very young ever really ask, which is, are you going to stay? I did not know the question, but I knew the look, so I gave the only answer I have ever known how to give. I'm not going anywhere, I said. I'm right here, I'm going to sit right here. And I did. I had 400 souls in the building and a man dying in Bay 9 and a queue that did not stop all night, and I sat on the floor of the linen store with my hand inside the warm dark of the nest, against the cold, fine scales of a child that was not mine and not even of my kind, and every time the great door of the sky closed above the cloud and he flinched, I said it again. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I went out twice, once to sit with the man in Bay 9, because Edric was wrong about me but right about the man, and the man should not have died alone, and he did not, and once to break up a fight in the food line. Both times I came back. Both times the child had pulled himself to the very edge of the shelf and was watching the door, and both times when I came through it the keening that had started up went silent, all at once, the way a held breath lets go. By the third hour I had given him my name, not because he could say it, the kin do not shape our sounds, but because a thing you are caring for ought to have someone with a name caring for it, and so that he would have a sound that meant the one who came back, and because he needed a name himself, and I would not give one of the kin's young a human pet name as if he were a stray, I did not name him at all. I called him when I called him anything, little one, and there you are, and once, when he finally slept and his side slowed and the bad wing eased against him, I called him brave, which he was, and which I have never been ashamed to have said, whatever I learned about him afterward. He slept against my hand for 2 hours. I did not move it, though it went dead to the wrist and the cold came up off the stone into my hip and stayed there for a week. You do not move your hand. That is the whole of it. That is the entire trade of caring for the frightened, the thing they never put in the manuals. When the frightened thing finally sleeps against your hand, you do not move your hand. Everything else is detail. It was while he slept that I first felt them looking. I cannot tell it to you plainer than I felt it, which was not plain at all. It came up through the floor, a pressure very low below hearing, the way you feel a great hauler's engines through the soles of your boots before you hear them in the air, except the haulers had stopped. The front had closed the lanes and nothing was flying into Saltgate that night, nothing at all, and yet there it was, that low pressure, circling, coming near and going far and coming near again. I thought at first it was the war, the broods grinding at one another up in the dark, and I suppose in a sense it was. But it had a shape to it that the war did not have. The war was everywhere and nowhere. This was looking for something. It went over us, slow, and the child in the nest stirred without waking and turned his head toward the ceiling and made, in his sleep, very small, the same low broken sound he had made when he asked me to stay. I did not understand it. I put my free hand on his back and I told him I was there, and he settled, and the pressure went over and away and came back and went over and away. All night it circled. I told myself it was the storm. I am a practical woman, and I told myself it was the storm. In the gray before the morning shift, Edric came and found me on the floor of the linen store. He stood in the door a long moment looking at the two of us, at the old woman with her dead arm and the dragon child asleep with one clawed hand closed loose around her thumb, and whatever he had come to say he did not say it. What he said instead, low, so as not to wake the thing he had wanted dead 12 hours before, was, "There's something circling the halt, Una, high up. The marshals on the roof can't see it for the cloud, but the instruments are screaming. It's big, bigger than the haulers. It's been going round and round since the 3rd hour, and it won't answer the beacon." "I know," I said. "I've felt it. They're frightened up there. They think it's one of the war broods come down to the deck. They're talking about—" He stopped. "Una, if a war brood has come down to Saltgate, they're going to want to give it whatever it wants and get it gone before it takes the building apart. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" I understood him. I understood that somewhere a frightened man with authority was beginning to think that the price of saving 400 souls might be one small amber life he could put out on the platform to satisfy a thing in the sky. I had seen that arithmetic before. I had done that arithmetic before, on other nights with other lives, when there was no good answer and someone had to choose. I knew it was not always wrong. I put my dead arm under the child and gathered him up and stood, which took me 3 tries and a hand on the shelf, and the child woke and clung and did not keen, because by then he had learned that when I lifted him it was towards something and not away from everything. "Then they'll have to come and take him out of my arms," I said, "and I'll be standing on the platform when they do." Edric looked at me for a long time. He was not a brave man and he was not a coward. He was a tired man like me, like all of us that winter, and I watched him do the arithmetic himself, and I watched him fail to make it come out the way the frightened men on the roof wanted it to. "You're a stubborn old fool," he said. "I know," I said. "Go and tell them I'm coming up." And Edric, he stopped in the door. "Tell them he's a child, whatever's circling, whatever it wants. Make them say the word child before they decide anything. Make them say it out loud." The roof of Saltgate Halt was a flat field of snow-swept steel, with the landing beacon strobing red into the underside of the cloud. And when I came up out of the stairwell with the child held against my chest under my coat, the wind took the breath out of me, and the cold went through everything I had on as if I had nothing on at all. There were a dozen of them up there, marshals, the station master, 2 of the brood herders from among the refugees who had been hauled up to translate or to be blamed. I could not tell which. They were all looking up, and the thing in the cloud had stopped circling. It was descending. You will want me to tell you it was beautiful, and it was, but that is not the word. The word is large in a way that beauty has nothing to do with. The way a mountain coming down out of the sky toward you has nothing to do with beauty. It came through the cloud head first, and the cloud peeled off its shoulders in long ribbons, and the red beacon light ran down the wet slate of its scales and showed me, a piece at a time as it cleared the murk, the true scale of the thing. The head longer than the hauler cars, the horns swept back like the prow of a ship, the wings still folded, and yet wide enough that I understood the building under my feet was smaller than one of them. It set down at the far edge of the roof with a care that was the most frightening thing about it, because a thing that size has no business being careful, and it was careful, It set itself down the way I set a needle down by a sleeping patient, and the steel sang under the weight and then went still. It looked at us. The eye of it was the size of my two hands together, and it was the color of old amber with the light far back in it, and it went over the marshals and the station master and the two herders, who had gone down on their faces in the snow, and it found me, the small old woman at the mouth of the stairwell with her coat held closed over something, and it stopped. The station master was talking. I want to be fair to him. He was doing the bravest thing a frightened man can do, which is to keep speaking when he wants to run. He was offering the great thing whatever it wanted. Safe passage, fuel, the lanes opened, the war kept clear of the halt. He did not know what it wanted, and so he was offering all of it, and the thing was not listening to him at all. The thing was looking at my coat. And then it made a sound. I had been hearing the low, broken sound from the child all night, and I had thought I understood it, the smallness of it, the asking. I did not understand it until the great thing on the far side of the roof answered it, because that was what the sound was, the same sound. The very same broken, low question, "Are you there? Are you there?" But coming out of a throat the size of a holler. It did not sound small at all. It went through the steel and through the soles of my boots and up through my bones, and it was the loudest, gentle thing I have ever heard in my life. It was a mother's voice. There is no mistaking a mother's voice. It is the same in every language there has ever been and in the languages that are not languages at all, and I had heard it 10,000 times in the bays of Saltgate from human throats, and I knew it the instant it came out of that impossible body. She was not threatening us. She had not come down to the deck to take the building apart. She had come looking for her child. The child under my coat went rigid, and then he began to shake, and then he made the sound back, and oh, it was so small against hers, so thin, but she heard it. The head came around and down, and the great amber eye fixed on the front of my coat, and the whole roof seemed to lean toward us, and I understood, all at once and far too late, what I had been holding all night. What Edric had warned me I did not know. The low folk of the broods do not travel their young across the war lanes. Only one kind of young travels in the worst of it, hurried and hidden and hauled where it should not be. The kind that the war is being fought over. The kind that the whole of a brood will turn aside from a battle in the high dark to come down to the deck and find. I had set the shoulder of an heir. I had bound the wing of the matriarch's own. I had sat on a cold floor all night with my dead arm under the future of a power I could not have named, calling him brave, calling him little one, telling him a tired woman's half-lie that I would not go anywhere, and the dark above the cloud had been listening and had come to hold me to it. I did the only thing there was to do. I am not a brave woman. I told you that, and it is true. What I am is a woman who has carried frightened things across cold floors for a great many years, and the body does what the years have trained it to do. I walked out across the snow toward the great amber eye. The marshals were shouting at me to stop. The station master had gone silent. I walked out to the middle of the roof, into the wind, with the wind trying to take me off my feet, and I went down, not in fear. My knees were simply finished and would hold me no longer. I went down onto them in the snow in front of the matriarch of the Caldwind, and I opened my coat. He looked up at her. She looked down at him, and he did not leap to her. That is the part that I have never been able to tell anyone without my voice going. He was hurt and he was hers, and she was right there, the whole vast warm certainty of her right there, and he did not leap. He turned his head and he looked up at me, the small slit eye gone wide and black the way it had been on the platform, asking the same question he had asked me all night, the only question the very young ever really ask, and I understood that he was asking it of me now, "Are you going to stay?" Because in the worst night of his short life I had been the one who came back, and he did not yet have the words, even in his own wordless tongue, for the difference between the one who loves you and the one who simply did not leave. So I told him, one more time, with the mother of the storm bent over the both of us close enough that her breath moved my hair. I put my hand on his cold, fine-scaled neck, and I said it the way I had said it all night. "Go on," I said. It's all right, look who came back for you, look who came all this way. My voice was no good at all by then. I told you I wasn't going anywhere, but you've got somewhere to go now. Go on to her. I've got you, right up until she's got you. I've got you. And he went. I have thought a great deal in the years since about what happened next, and I have decided that the songs have it wrong on purpose, because the truth does not make as good a song. The songs say the great brood of the Caldwind came down to Saltgate and bowed to a human, that the sky knelt, that there was light and a sound like horns. None of that happened. The frightened men want it to have happened that way because a sky that kneels is a sky you can understand. What happened was quieter than that, and I have come to think it was a far larger thing than kneeling. The matriarch took her child up against the warm slate of her throat, and he disappeared into her the way a small flame disappears into a great fire, and for a moment she only held him, and the whole roof and the whole halt and I think the whole frozen moon of Bray held still while a mother held her found child. The war went on somewhere above the cloud. It did not matter. Up there the powers of the sky were tearing one another apart over which of them would hold what, and down here on a steel roof in the snow none of it mattered for the length of one held breath, because a child had been lost and was found, and that is the only war anyone has ever truly fought, dressed up however you like. Then she put her great head down. She did not bow. I want to be exact because it matters. She did not lower herself before me as a subject before a queen. That would have been a lie, and the kin do not lie with their bodies the way we do with our mouths. What she did was smaller, and I have never gotten over it. She brought the broad, warm plate of her brow down out of the storm, slow, careful, the way I had brought my warmed hands down to a torn wing, and she pressed it, once lightly, with all that impossible mass held back to nothing, against the back of the hand I had laid all night against her son, brow to hand, the way the kin greet their own. The way, I learned later, a mother of the Caldwind acknowledges the one who has stood the night watch over her young when she could not, which is the highest debt their kind knows, higher than blood, because blood you are owed and the night watch is freely given. Her brow was warm. After the cold of him all night, the warmth of her was the thing that broke me. I knelt in the snow with the brow of a storm against my hand, and I cried the way you cry when you are too old and too tired to do it gracefully. And she let me. She held still and let me. And the child looked out at me from the safe slate hollow of her throat with the one good eye, and the bad wing was folded against him the way I had told him to fold it, and he was not keening any more. She did not stay. The war does not let mothers stay. She gathered herself, and the wind came off her like a tide going out, and she rose into the cloud with her child held against her, and the low pressure went up through the soles of my boots one last time and away, up into the dark where the powers were settling whatever it was they would settle, and I never saw either of them again, not with my own eyes. But I will tell you what came of it, because Edric asked me that morning with something like wonder and something like fear what I thought I had done, and the truth is I did not do anything. I want that understood. I did not save a kingdom. I did not turn a war. I set a shoulder and I bound a wing, and I sat on a cold floor and I did not move my hand. That is all. That is the entire account. What came of it was this. The lanes over Saltgate halt stayed open all that terrible winter when every other halt on the frontier was cut off and dark. No order came, no decree, no thing you could point to, only that the war, which went everywhere and took everything, went around us. Haulers that should not have made it through. The front that closed every other lane never quite closed ours. Brood herders who had nothing gave what they had to the human queues and would not say why. And once, in the deep of that winter, a low clan of the Caldwind came down on our platform out of the storm, and laid down on the cold stone a great folded thing that turned out to be warmth, heat cells of the kin's own making, enough to thaw the east wing and keep it thawed till spring, and they would not be thanked. And when I came out onto the platform, the herder who had led them looked at me a long moment and then put her brow down, once lightly, against the back of my hand, and went. So they remembered me. Edric had said the thing might not even remember me, and he was wrong. They remembered, not because I had done anything large, but because I had done the one small thing that their whole vast hierarchy turns on, and that we forget half the time we are even doing. I had treated the lowest, most frightened, most forgettable life in the building as if it were worth sitting on a cold floor all night for. They had thought, I think, that we did not have it in us. That a species that runs from the sky and steps around the dying in its own cues could not also be the species that does not move its hand. I had shown one of their great ones otherwise, by accident, in the dark, asking nothing, and it turned out that was the only thing they had ever wanted to know about us. I am very old now. My knees finished long ago, and the cold that came up out of that floor never entirely left my hip, and I would not give it back if I could. People come, sometimes, having heard the songs, and they want me to be in the songs. They want the sky that knelt, the light, the horns. I tell them there was none of that. I tell them there was a frightened child and a tired woman and a cold floor and a promise made half out of habit, and a mother who came a long way through a war to be held to it. They go away disappointed. That is all right, most of them do. But sometimes one of them stays and sits down and listens past the part they came for, and to that one I tell the rest of it, the part I have never managed to say without my voice going. I tell them that the largest thing I ever held was not the storm that bent its brow to my hand. It was the small amber weight that turned, with his mother right there and the whole warm certainty of her waiting, and looked back at me first, to ask if I was going to stay. I tell them that I think that is the truest thing I know about any of it, theirs or ours, the kin or the killed for, that what the frightened remember is not the one who saved them. It is the one who came back, and that any of us on any cold floor with nothing at all to give can be that, can simply not go anywhere, and that the dark sometimes is listening and comes down a long way to honor it. I told a frightened child I would not leave him. I meant it the way you mean a thing you have said 100 times, and it turned out to be the most important true thing I ever said. I'm glad I kept my word.